what's up? Aaron here at Canadian Looney. It's Thursday, and it's a big memorandum of understanding signing going on in Alberta. A memorandum of understanding is worth this. It's not worth squat. It's a gesture. It's foolish. It's nothing. Anyhow, what are we going to do about that? Our pre-show, we've got a lot of great content here to watch, a lot of fun stuff. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in here. We do have a fun pre-show, a great chat room. I love this community. I'm looking forward to having these people make me laugh for the next couple of hours. Anyhow, we're going to jump in feet first, head first, I guess. We're going straight into Michael Cooper, Michael Barrett. Anyways, we've got lots of committees to watch. Couple of speeches, maybe if we can squeeze them in before question period starts, which we'll get into question period right on time. Anyhow, folks, here we go. Let's
5 minutes,
kick
5 minute rounds.
This
Thank you.
off. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups: the globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
For 5 minutes, 5 minute rounds now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gilmain, you referenced the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act. It's been characterized by some as essentially the gold standard. I take it from your comments that you would not view it as such. Is that fair?
I don't know yet.
Okay. And you...
And if I may...
Yes.
I did mention the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, which is essentially, the golden standard. In the world, we started, seeing, many states changing their laws to essentially mimic this trend. It took a couple of years. It wasn't done in a year. And so at the moment, we know that the GDPR has been, we know the GDPR has been a success, in terms of its reach beyond the EU, but we don't know yet whether the EU AI Act will gain the same success. And the fact that the update I gave you, from a week ago, does demonstrate that we are still building the plane while we are, flying, if you will allow me the expression.
So just to clarify, you would view it as the gold standard?
You would what?
You would view it as the gold standard or not the gold standard? I mean,
I don't know.
You don't know.
I think it's interesting.
Okay.
If you were to ask me, I think this is really well thought. They really tried, to come up with something similarly to what we had in Canada in ADA. So clearly, this was this idea of proposing something. Is it sufficient? Is it needed? I don't know yet.
You spoke about some of the challenges, though, including the regulatory burden imposed on...
Remember to smash the like and hit subscribe, guys. Sorry to interrupt.
Companies. I saw one assessment done by the EU that indicates that it could cost businesses hundreds of thousands of dollars for using just one AI system. That seems to be problematic. I hope you would agree with that. Would you care to elaborate on some of those issues around what I think is problematic in terms of the burdens that it places that aren't necessarily in line with some of the risks?
Absolutely. So I will give you an example. Let's say you were the owner of a CrossFit gym company, and let's say you're based out of Saint-Louis-du-Haha, and you want to use AI for real-time movement feedback and potentially performance tracking and predictive PRs, personal records. So you think it's a good idea for your members. Under the EU AI Act, this would require quite a bit of money to essentially, propose these features to your users. And so you would have to do compliance assessment. You would need to have in place accountability documentation, policies and procedures. You would need potentially to have some record-keeping obligation, register in case of an incident. You would need to make sure that there's a human oversight. Potentially, you may have to notify someone if there's a problem. Remember, you're in Saint-Louis-du-Haha, and you own a CrossFit gym. And I'm not saying I'm against this obligation. I think it makes sense in some situation. But the fact is, what we see with the new laws at the moment with a lot of obligation. The massive problem is mostly for small and medium-sized enterprise. It seems that we have not found the response for these layers of organization that are really key for Canada. So I think that's my take. Again, I'm not against. I just think that it's a lot, and yeah.
Well, and here in Canada, we're really lagging behind when it comes to adaptation. And you cited the EU law. The UK has also done some work around AI regulation. It seems to me to be a more flexible approach with sector-specific guidelines. Do you have any thoughts on the UK approach? And is there anything to learn from what the UK is doing?
Thank you for citing the UK example. I think it's I'm not pretending to be an expert on this system, but it seems to me reasonable in a sense that we don't do nothing, but at the same time we focus on some sectors, which to me, makes a ton of sense. That's my initial reaction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gilmain and Mr. Cooper. Madame Lapointe, this is going to be a hell of a discussion, I think. Mr. Barrett, for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Gilmain, the current reliance that we have is on a voluntary AI code, if I understand correctly, and the European Union enforces the AI Act, which is binding. From a compliance perspective, does this gap expose Canadians, Canadian businesses to legal uncertainty, and does it create a greater risk for privacy and algorithmic bias risks?
Thank you for your question. Not necessarily. And let me explain you why. We have at the moment data protection laws that are working pretty well, and we do have privacy commissioner at the federal level and in different provinces as well. And in these laws, we already have some existing requirements, including when it comes to AI, more specifically when there's an automated decision-making process. And it's interesting you raised the EU example, because I did mention it in my opening remarks that it came into force in 2024. But last Wednesday, as a matter of fact, when I got the invitation to this session, the same day, the European tabled the digital omnibus on AI. And essentially, this text aims to essentially extend timelines for compliance, but also to simplify the burden and the obligation on small and medium-sized organizations. So what it tells us, it does tell us that they came up with a proposal, but it's still evolving, while, we are moving forward. And I think it's important to keep this in mind.
What measures do you think should be in place to for individuals who are shaping AI policy to ensure and prevent that there isn't regulatory capture and conflicts of interest?
So in terms of the potential obligation we could think of is mostly potential compliance assessment, but not too much, because at the moment, what we are seeing, especially in Quebec, is a tendency to put impact assessment pretty much in any legislation we see. And that's a problem. And we see that it's not feasible for most organizations. There's potentially also the idea of more accountability documentation. So internally, having some procedures and processes. Again, the idea of policies and procedure is amazing. Even though I'm a lawyer, I'm a big fan of these documents. It's not sufficient. But finally, at the end, I think it's more about training within organization. And that's what we see more and more, at least with my clients. There's a goal to really, ensure, the staff knows, understand, the potential AI risk, but also potential, benefits for their own organization.
So it's a rapidly evolving space. We've seen companies like NVIDIA finance customer purchases of their own products to accelerate their adoption. Do you see similar risks if individuals with major AI investments are advising on Canada's AI policy, where their financial interests could shape the rules? That's what I'm driving at.
I'm not sure I follow you in terms of this question. My apologies.
Okay. I got part of an answer in the first half, so I'm going to move to my next one if that's okay. And if you reflect on it afterwards and you wanted to submit that back to the committee in writing, I'd appreciate that. Mr. Bourgon, your institute warns about catastrophic AI risks, though you did temper some of that in your opening statements, that it might not all be bad. But there is an absence of binding legislation, and we have a reliance on voluntary codes. Do you think that this approach is sufficient to prevent the worst case scenario, or do you think that to prevent the worst case scenario, the most extreme effort should be undertaken, which would be a moratorium until on development until robust, conflict-free regulations are put in place?
Thank you. Great question. So, I mean, when I think about AI, I often try and separate the applications of AI and the current systems that we have today. And I think many of those should be regulated the way that most normal technologies and new technologies are regulated. The thing I focused most of my time on is thinking about where the technology is going and what the risk will be from these very advanced systems. I do think in that case, it is unfortunately a very challenging coordination problem. Any one actor deciding that they think that the risk is too great and slowing down does not really help avert anyone else building a system that would pose those risks. And so I think the kind of main area of focus should be on trying to have those conversations with partners to try and figure out what an agreement could be that they could come to stop pushing the frontier. But I do think that our best chance of not succumbing to that catastrophe is to find some way to agree with international partners on which frontiers we aren't going to push.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Testimony, appreciate it very much. Mr. Chalk, I appreciated your comments, and also your board chair of Solus Power, I believe his name is Neil Desai. Yes, he's made some interesting comments over the last number of months that I wanted to put to you, and I think they're certainly quite in line with what you're putting forward. He said, the number one issue I see for our country is that our economics don't work. He went on to say structures in Canada around talent, capital, intellectual property, companies' freedom to operate look very different only a decade ago, with entrepreneurs saying that a welcoming and supportive ecosystem put wind in their sails at that time. He then said, but those structures have changed during the last 10 years. The wind has actually been in their face of the entrepreneurs who are trying to do this at scale from Canada for the benefit of all Canadians. And he really describes Canada as having, quote, this weird innovations ecosystem structural problem not seen in other countries, where intermediaries such as financiers, universities, and business incubators and accelerators are put at the center for validating business. Everywhere else, the business gets to validate business. So with your comments on IP, obviously we need a very robust ecosystem to support the scale-ups that you've talked about. So in light of some of his comments, can you give the committee a few more ideas and for our policy discussion of what the Canadian government should be doing to facilitate this type of renewed ecosystem for entrepreneurs?
Thank you very much. That's a complex question. I'll try to do my very best to answer it. I certainly can't speak for Neil Desai, but I would say having the incubators and all the various supports you see for small business startups and what, well, not so much scale-ups, but certainly startups in Canada is a very healthy thing, and you see a lot of companies get going. But the statistics around success rates of startups are pretty terrible. You do get validation through incubation and some of the sort of nurturing that happens there, but the most true validation of a business is from the market. And I think that's what we're probably missing. Procurement in Canada is a game where we play not to lose, to quote Ahmad Riscala, one of my friends. We're not playing to win. So we're very careful, we're very cautious, and of course it's taxpayers' money, and we should be. But I think we need to be prepared to take more risks into procurement. And if the Canadian Armed Forces, if this opportunity with the current expansion of investment is going to provide the opportunity for full participation across this country, I think we can get a lot of validation that's true to the market, that builds a lot of scale-ups into bigger and medium-sized companies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garagozali. Is that right? I saw you nodding your head quite a bit there, and your opening comments as well, I think, hit on a lot of this. I think in particular you said we need to rely less on foreign purchasing, rather we need to empower our small and medium enterprises to innovate. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm specifically talking on the space side, but I'm pretty sure defense as a whole, because even on the maritime domain, we are really relying on, we are becoming a purchaser. And again, specifically talking on the space side, Canada just recently signed a contract on WildfireSat. Canada does not have a very active space ecosystem when it comes to contracting active projects. We just signed a wildfire project. It's phase one, $150 million, I believe. The company that has that project is an American company and a German company. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I don't think there are any Canadian companies that are put out of that. The reason behind it is we simply just do not have those sort of systems that have been built in Canada that can come back and respond to those needs. So we end up basically just going out into the market and seeing what other countries are building and say, hey, can we use your systems? We'll pay for it. And that's very dangerous because a lot of these capabilities across all defense domain do need to be, I guess we kind of need to pick and choose which areas we're working with. You know, we have a very strong shipbuilding program. But when it comes to other domains of defense, are we going to just become a purchaser, or are we going to put our foot down and say some of these emerging markets, including commercial space, are very raw? However, we've got countries like US, Germany is a very good example of that. A lot of G7 countries putting significant amount of funds behind these. And we're just simply falling way behind, and we're just going to sit in the back and just become purchasers.
I believe last year you were a witness at Defense Committee, and you mentioned, I'll just quote you, quote, "We must increase support for the Canadian Space Agency to ensure that research and development is essential. Space capabilities continue to grow." So it sounds like, of course, you would appreciate more support, and for that to really support our ecosystem in Canada in the space industry. And of course, the Liberals just announced $500 million for the European Space Agency. So do you feel that perhaps that money should have been the Canadian Space Agency to better support our local? Or how do you see this working in the grander
So
scale?
that $580 million, I believe, that is going to European Space Agency via Canadian Space Agency, as we are a contributing member to that. That is a very good program. However, one thing about that is you do have to find a European partner to work with to unlock that $500 million. So it's not like we can just go to European Space Agency and say, hey, we want to work on a project, and they're like, here's a $500 million project. The problem with that is just finding that European partner in a lot of these cases, because again, we do have a very good relationship with European Space Agency. That program is very good if we could be co-aligned with another similar investments that is directly invested into the Canadian companies to bring them up to a point that they are on the same playing field with the German, let's say, or UK companies, because we simply are not. Right now, if you look at the space ecosystem in Canada, it's not a really diverse ecosystem. You've got one or two companies that are generating a lot of products, and they have exports. But when you look at the SMEs, that's just a huge unbalance there, if you will.
Thank you.
So it would be good if that money could be collaborated with the same amount back directly into the Canadian industry as well.
Thank you, Madame Dancho.
In the last 5 years, where did this funding come from? Was there an huge increase in funding for your department to get the military police improved in their training and investigative skills? How much was that, and when was it?
So unfortunately, I wouldn't have the exact figure dollar amount to be able to tell you exactly. What I can commit to is there has been extensive increase in my operational budget that allows me to ensure that I have what I need to meet the demands of providing a police service to the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence.
And I understand that your forces are being poached by the civilian forces. So how are you keeping up with that?
So like all of our police agencies in Canada, ma'am, we all have a crisis when it comes to staffing, and I think I'm no different than Fiona has alluded to, where we're always looking and ensuring that we have personnel. You are absolutely correct in that some members of the military police are being hired by other civilian police agencies, but I have a very robust selection and recruitment program for the military police, and just as they're hiring people from my agency, I also have the ability to hire from theirs, and so we see where we have a very effective approach to deal with and ensure we maintain an operational level of military police members to address concerns and provide a policing service.
Okay, so what measures are now in place with the military police, the National Investigative Services, Defense Council Services, to prevent the chain of command from trying to cover up for the perpetrators of sexual assault?
So I believe, ma'am, I would look at that from two perspectives. I think that there's been an increase in confidence by the military community, both defense and military members, in terms of the independence of the military police. I work completely independent from the chain of command. The military police do not have to go through their chain of command to actually address any concerns, or sorry, the members. They can come directly to the military police and actually provide their allegations to us without impediment on the chain of command. As the Canadian Forces Provost Marshal, I determine when and if the chain of command is actually advised of a policing investigation, and I do that only to the extent that I permit them to deal with any operational impacts. And a very good example of that would be if we need to separate members to ensure the safety of an individual, but there's no requirement for me to actually provide detailed information about an investigation or my authority.
And what has changed recently to ensure the authenticity of the chain of evidence so that it's preserved if it has to be transferred to the civilian police?
So the manner in which we actually do our evidence collection and preservation or continuity of evidence would be exactly the same as every police agency. Our military police training is exactly in accordance with the rules of evidence. We follow the exact same procedures in terms of how we maintain evidence. We have no concern with the continuity of evidence, the preservation of evidence, the collection of evidence, and the ability to then take that evidence and transfer it to our civilian police counterparts. In fact, we have transferred a number of files since 2021. That included all of the information.
Just to interrupt, just briefly, talk a bit slower.
Sorry.
The interpreters are having a hard time keeping up to you.
Oh, I apologize. I'm from Newfoundland. I talk fast.
I'll give you some extra time here.
So in essence, I really think that we have our foundational training for the military police, the manner in which we collect evidence, preserve evidence, maintain continuity of evidence. You have to understand we follow the exact same rules in the military justice system as the civilian justice system. So therefore, for me, there is no concern of how we've done it. We have successfully done this on a multitude of occasions, not just for CCSO, but all types of offenses for which we transfer between ourselves and our civilian police on an ongoing basis across this country.
So how often is the principle of unlimited liability used to discourage victims of sexual assault from pressing charges?
I can only speak to my example of where I see victims coming forward and talking specifically to the military police. And I believe there's been a lot of change in the Canadian Armed Forces. I am a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I think the environment we work in today is significantly different even than as early as 2015. And I believe we've actually instilled a culture where it is expected and it is encouraged for people who believe they've been harmed, whether it be CCSO or any type of harm, to come forward and hold individuals accountable. I think we have a very solid process that allows people to be held accountable for their actions. And I believe we see growing confidence in not just the Canadian Armed Forces as an institution, but the military police's ability to actually address any allegations that come forward. And I think that comes because we have a lot of tools that allow them to do that and feel comfortable doing that without retribution.
Thank you. So for Mr. Kerr, I have three quick questions. C11, if passed, do you believe your office would lose its independence as you'll be more influenced by the Minister of National Defence? Are there any concerns from your office, should C11 become law, that your office has less independence at the expense of the Office of the Minister of National Defence? And what would your recourse be if the minister tries to intervene in your job affecting certain cases, again, if C11 becomes law?
So, Mr. Chair, I have no concerns with the transfer of reporting responsibility from the JAG to the minister. I'm frankly, I'm ambivalent. I don't know if it improves my independence or just or maintains it. I certainly don't see that it weakens the independence. The relationship is akin to the one between the DPP and the Attorney General. What's clear, in particular from the Cawthorn case at the Supreme Court of Canada, is that the minister, when acting in a prosecutorial function, has constitutional obligations to perform that function free of improper motives and improper influences. So that to me is really not an issue. I can't say,
sir,
Colonel,
if it was,
I'm sorry.
what would be your recourse?
I'm sorry, Ms. Watch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Ms. Wood, one of the things that you talk about is not only the importance of making sure that kids are educated really well in terms of their use online. Of course, you know, there's mental health concerns. There's there's so many social concerns. There's concerns around gender and sexuality, et cetera. One of the things that you talk about is the importance, of course, of equipping parents and the importance of entering into classrooms. You've discussed that further here today. But one of the things that I'd love for you to touch on is actually, if you're able to, and if not, that's okay, but like, are you able to outline, I guess, how is social media, how are channels used by those that are wishing to lure, groom, and exploit young people? What does that look like in terms of how social media is used to accomplish those ends?
Absolutely. That's a loaded question. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. One of the biggest things that I look at is fake profiles or fake accounts on Snapchat. Kids are getting friend requests from people they don't know. They're adding people they don't know. They're Snapchatting people they don't know. And they assume that it's just someone from their community or someone else knows. And that is having a deep effect on our children. They are conversing with a lot of strangers. And then there's the comparison culture piece where they're watching influencers on social media posting things, and that becomes popular because it has the most likes. There are so many things on social media that are terrifying our kids into this comparison culture and making it unsafe where they don't feel adequate. And exploiters and predators prey on that. And so I will follow up with a deeper explanation, but it's mostly just you create this sense of vulnerability, and human traffickers and exploiters and predators prey on that, and they know exactly where to find it based on a child's social media presence or profile.
Thank you for that. Ms. Holland, when you go into a school system and you teach on this, of course, I understand that you teach different things at different grade levels. I would imagine there would be a grade level where this would be appropriate to talk about. I would hope that it's actually sooner rather than later. When you do that, what do you teach kids?
Yeah, this conversation applies to all levels, and absolutely, it's always age appropriate, but you have to start. Now they say that one of the first places where children are first exposed to pornography is on the school bus. That means you have to be having conversations with children about what to do when you see a naked body. You don't have to tell them about pornography. You don't have to tell them the stats. But before they get on the school bus, which is 5 years old. So absolutely, you can have age appropriate conversations at all ages. And so, yeah, 5, 6 year olds, my emphasis would be spending as less time on screens as possible, playing outside, just getting together with friends. We have to change the culture. We can't just accept that kids are going to have screens, and so therefore let's make sure we can limit it and stuff. We absolutely have to change this culture. I think someday we're going to see giving a child a tablet as a form of child abuse, because you are already rewiring, you're allowing technology to rewire their brain. So at a small age, trying to get them off as much as possible. And then also, but, you know, asking questions about what they're on, getting a sense of where they're at, but then teaching them red flags. Red flags are friends. Not friends. People that are too friendly. People that you don't know that are all of a sudden think you're amazing and want to know about what you like to do and what's your favorite food, and they want to know everything about you. Those are red flags. When they want to ask to move the conversation somewhere else, red flag. Kids are fantastic. They're not scared of all the things that we're scared about. They're hungry for knowledge. They're not getting the knowledge at home. They're not getting it in school. And so you do need advocates like us that can give them age-appropriate information in a way that doesn't make them fearful of the internet, but does make them rethink about how much time they're spending on it. And you can talk to them about dopamine as well. They need to know these things. They're already feeling it. They just don't have words for it. So we need to help them to understand what it is. The eyes cannot see what the brain does not know. We need to talk to them about their brain so that they can identify harmful behavior when they're feeling it.
Yeah. Ms. Coulter, did you wish to speak to that?
Oh, yeah, I would love to speak a little bit about the fact that I think that while there's been a lot of really interesting things said, but I think the thing is that I agree exactly that young people are very smart. They're very excited. They want to know.
Sorry, I'm just going to hone in on my question. My question is, what is the path that is exploiting young people? So luring them in.
Yep.
And then ultimately resulting in their exploitation. How is that happening?
I think that I'm not exactly sure how it's happening, but I do think that we need to look at the technology itself, right? What are the aspects of each individual platform, the affordances of the platform that allow these things to happen, right? I think sort of leaving it to parents and even leaving it to kids themselves to circumvent these things is really problematic. I think every platform is designed a little bit differently, but I think there's a lot of pieces of the platforms themselves that allow for these sort of things to happen, and I think we need to build. The platforms were never designed with young people in mind, right? They were built for adults, and young people were never considered. So we need to take a step backwards and think about how we can include young people in thinking about creating ways and aspects of these platforms to be more designed to meet their needs, to keep them safe. I think we need to implement a lot of sort of discussion with these different platforms and different companies, and they need to be included in part of our policy.
So safety by design.
Safety by design, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And including young people in those conversations of safety by design, because we're excluding them.
Thank you. Mr. Mudd.
From the Conservative Party for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I'm going to direct my questions to Mr. Burton regarding the endless delay around the implementation of the Foreign Influence Registry. As you noted, Mr. Burton, the Liberals promised that the Foreign Influence Registry would be up and running 1 year after Bill C-70 received royal assent. 1 year was June of this year. June came and went. It wasn't up and running. The minister said then it would be up and running by September. September came and went. He then said December, and yet here we are almost in December, and no commissioner has been appointed. We have no registry, and I would note that under the legislation, the leaders of recognized parties in the House and the Senate must be consulted on the commissioner, and the appointment of the commissioner must be ratified in the House of Commons and the Senate. So there are a number of processes that haven't happened either. So given that, it would seem to me that we have no idea when the registry is going to be up and running. Is that fair?
Yes. The minister has said it would be coming by the end of this year in his most recent statement to parliamentary committee. The public safety people have been briefing us that it would be coming next spring. There's a suggestion that there are long delays in appointing the commissioner, the need for top secret security clearance and so on. But, when the government needed a fentanyl czar, they seem to be able to do an order in council and get that person in place pretty quick. So I'm puzzled as to why it takes so long to come up with a commissioner. I do see the commissioner as being key. If we can get a strong commissioner who can make these interpretations of the legislation, things like Senator Wu's concern about in association with, to get that clear what it means. What about people who are anticipating future benefits in the Chinese regime if they go along with a Chinese agenda when they're in a position of public trust in the civil service or parliament? What about secondary influence? In other words, a Canadian company that has extensive dealings with Chinese communist business networks that then sponsors a research institution. You know, there are just a lot of questions there, and they really need a commissioner, in my view, a strong commissioner on site, fully qualified, to be able to sort them out. But what seems to be happening now is that public safety is trying to come up with regulations and interpretations which I believe will inhibit the potential independence of the commissioner in making this registry effective and actually getting names of people on the registry. That being said, you know, from my talking to John Garneau, who was an advisor to the Australian Prime Minister when they put together their act, the simple existence of a registry seems to have a dampening effect on politicians who might be induced to get themselves in situations where they become beholden to China or another foreign power. So, you know, we need to get this thing existing. And certainly the fact that we had an election after we'd heard that from parliamentary, from a security committee, that there were a significant number of MPs and a slightly larger number of staffers who appeared to be under the influence of a foreign power. It's outrageous to me that the election happened when we didn't have any means to go into this in a fair way to ensure that Canadians are aware of people who may have not been entirely uninfluenced or unable to take the temptation of benefits from a foreign power or subject to a very sophisticated engagement by Chinese entities.
Well, thank you for that. You know, it was 1st June, then it was September, then it was December. Now you're saying, according to public safety officials, it's spring, but who knows if it will be spring. The Liberals have a long track record of opposing the setting up a foreign influence registry. They campaigned against it. They amplified Beijing's disinformation against Kenny Chiu after he brought forward a private member's bill to establish such a registry. So it seems to me that after years of opposing a registry, the latest tactic from this government is to be one of obstruction through endless delay. Is that fair?
I mean, I think that there is concern probably at the center of government about prominent Canadians, possibly former senior officials, who might have to register because of ongoing relationships with the Chinese state. And I have a notion of people that I think might fall into that category. But so long as we don't have a registry, we can't say for sure. You know, it's suspicion, but we really need a registry that makes it clear. And let's bear in mind, I mean, nothing stops you from, say, that large number of people, prominent Canadians, that suggested we should release Meng Wanzhou forthwith from putting a statement in the newspaper to that effect. But, you know, when we found out that Jean Charest was the recipient of a retainer from the Huawei company at the time that he was involved in this activity, that's information that I would have liked to have known at the time.
3 seconds. Merci pour vos... Thank you.
The first question is for Mr. Burton. In October 2024, Brookfield Asset Management brokered a $256 million loan with the Chinese State Bank while the current Prime Minister was the chair of that company. And in light of what we know about China cultivating business ties with senior policymakers and business leaders, would you classify this as a classic example of elite capture?
I am concerned about this. You know, it's similar to when we appointed Dominic Barton as the ambassador to China. That what if the prime ministership is a transitional job for Mr. Carney and that he'll return to business afterwards? The Chinese will naturally take into account what sort of policies he engaged in with regard to China while he was in that position. So I'm not suggesting that Mr. Carney is, you know, consciously preparing for this, but the effect is the same. And so one is concerned about matters like this, his previous connections with the Chinese regime, And I mean, in his current policies, which emphasize promoting Canadian prosperity through seeking to expand Canadian exports into the Chinese market, is meaning that we aren't implementing the registry, we aren't dealing with Chinese espionage in Canada. We're not taking effective measures against agents of the Chinese regime who are involved in intimidation and harassment activities in our country and so on. So the Chinese note that. And I think, if you look at the impact of our not implementing the registry, from the Chinese government's point of view, I think they welcome it as similar to the Uyghur resolution, where the Prime Minister and the entire Cabinet didn't vote in favor of it, that we don't really mean it, that we're not actually going to do it, that they'll continue to engage in their influence activities in Canada unhindered. The other country we have to look at is the United States, who have increasing doubts about the integrity of Canada as a country which is not infiltrated by China or other states. So, it runs into problems with whether we're going to continue in our role with the Five Eyes and the extent to which the United States feels they can share information with us, and it won't end up being leaked to the PRC. So there are a lot of implications in what you're saying here. It's a very complicated question.
I understand. It's a very complicated position that Canada finds itself in right now. You intimated in your testimony, Mr. Burton, that the eagerness by which the Minister in Public Safety Canada and the government has gone about passing Bill C-70, and then subsequently that eagerness seems to be dissipating as time has gone by. We have no appointed commissioner. You have intimated that there seems to be some softening in the implementation and the approach that the government is going to take if they ever do eventually get around to implementing or appointing a commissioner. Do you think that is because of pressure from Beijing? I mean, the Taiwanese have warned us very much that this is exactly the way the PRC does its business. Do you think that this registry is being compromised as part of a larger influence campaign from China?
Whether it's active or passive is another question, but the recent statements by the leader of the Taiwan delegation here in Canada, and Michael Kovrick's recent statements, and others, I agree with them that we do have a problem here of evidently responding to Chinese agendas in Canada, and this is an ongoing process. In other words, the infiltration gets deeper and deeper as time goes on, and China is becoming more and more aggressive, and we're seeing concerns about Chinese infiltration into Canadian infrastructure. Lead story in the National Post today about the possibility of Chinese sabotage of our water supply by working with the filtration stations. But it's not just the water; it's the EVs. There are just all sorts of areas that suggest that a future conflict with China will not be about buildings blowing up in faraway countries, but it'll be about the APMs won't work anymore. The electricity will turn off, and that real Canadian citizens will suffer real consequences from China's cyber infiltration into our system, which appears to be an ongoing matter.
Thank you for those answers, Mr. Burton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Culkins.
Merci pour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For months, Canadians have waited to see how this government, elected on promises of fiscal foresight, economic integrity, and monetary wizardry, would turn the fortunes of this nation around. Well, if Canadians expected any sort of responsible governance from this budget, they were sorely disappointed. Instead, they got a glossy communications document full of arbitrary promises about vague infrastructure spending, all dressed up behind a clever new accounting trick. Canadians rejoice, Madam Speaker. The government no longer racks up debt. It now makes capital investments. And they can be whatever the government wants. Apparently, the invisible hand of the market has struck a secret deal guaranteeing billions of investments from unknown private sector benefactors. To be clear, Madam Speaker, private sector investment can be beneficial to the nation. Banking on it to fund your infrastructure spending is not. all that to say, the government can be forgiven for taking what I'm sure they think is a bold, new approach to government financing. After all, along with the black shoes and white shirts in the PMO, their Prime Minister also brought a new fiscal calendar with him from his time in London, which is why we are now speaking to the budget in November instead of that of the more traditional spring. But the budget is just that. It's a statement of intentions. It remains to be seen what Parliament actually approves and how the government spends the money. I will give the government credit for one thing. It is refreshing to finally see some relief for the ever-suffering estimates process. We have time to actually flesh out the mains instead of diving through a budget and estimates at almost the same time. On to the content of the budget itself. One notable piece of the budget that is of great concern for not just my constituents, but for law-abiding firearm owners across the nation is the arbitrary ad hoc firearms policy. You would think that after 3 decades, at least one person might take the time to inform themselves as to how firearms operate. And yet, here we are.
65% of men say they delay seeing a doctor for symptoms of mental and physical health. Men's health is not a partisan issue. It's a health imperative. Delayed care costs lives and harms families. As a mother of 3 men, I say, let us break the silence, remove the stigma, advocate for research funding and mental health supports, and ensure confidential access to care. Let us speak up and speak out. Move men's health out of the shadows. Protect and support our fathers, husbands, and sons.
Bravo. Bravo.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, 75 years ago, a bricklayer arrived from Canadian shores from Italy seeking a better life. 75 years later, the granddaughter of this bricklayer serves in Canada's Parliament. As a daughter of Italian immigrants, I am proud to represent my community of King Vaughan. On Tuesday, I had the honour of being elected chair of the Canada-Italian Interparliamentary Group. I look forward to working with all parliamentarians and with Ambassador Cantanillo to advance diplomatic relationships between our 2 nations and explore new opportunities. Canada and Italy share a deep connection through over 1.6 million Canadians of Italian descent. Italian Canadians have left their mark on communities from coast to coast to coast. Canada's Conservatives stand united and ready to work with everyone for the best interest of Canada. Grazie a tutti I nostri cugini italiani. Viva Italia!
The honourable member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, in November 2023, the Health Committee tabled a unanimous report calling for a breast implant registry and recognition of breast implant illnesses. Health Canada has dragged its feet, and 3 years later, nothing has been done. This has been going on for 30 years. Health Canada should be ashamed of neglecting the health of several generations of women in this way. Cancer, anaplastic large cell lymphoma, debilitating fatigue, pain, severe weakness, stiffness, memory and concentration problems, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. These are all symptoms of breast implant illness. Is this what they want for women? The Minister for Health must exercise her political leadership so that women like Julie Elliott, Terry McGregor, Nancy Pratt, Isabelle Gaston, and all those who are suffering have not suffered in vain. And above all, to prevent other women from suffering as well. When will the Minister finally take action?
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Last month, the Quebec National Assembly adopted Bill 2.
Clinics in my riding and nearby warned that they may need to close their doors as a direct result of Law 2. Le financement gouvernemental.
Government funding and the salaries of the doctors who fund these public clinics will decrease significantly, while these clinics will be forced under supervision and sanctions to see more patients more quickly with fewer resources and for longer hours.
Clinics care for over 415,000 people in the West End of Montreal and offered more than 1 million appointments last year. Wow. They employ almost 400 doctors, and 6 to 8 weeks from now, many of these clinics may close, not because of choice, but because of Law 2. If the law forces them to close, their patients will have no choice but to go to already overcrowded emergency rooms. C'est catastrophique pour les patients.
This is catastrophic for the patients of my riding and patients throughout Quebec. I call on the Quebec government to amend Law 2.
The honourable member for Richmond Centre Marpole.
Mr. Speaker, British Columbians are now seeing the consequences of this Liberal government's reckless hard drug decriminalisation. Right. Even Premier David Eby has admitted, I was wrong. It wasn't the right policy. Communities in Richmond, Vancouver, and across the province are experiencing open drug use, rising disorder, and families increasingly afraid to walk in their own neighborhoods. This crisis did not happen by accident. It happened because the federal Liberal government granted BC an exemption that allowed the possession of fentanyl, crack, cocaine, and meth on our streets. Frontline officers, health experts, and local leaders have been pleading for help, yet this government still refuses to take responsibility. Will the Liberals end this hard drug experiment now?
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honour the life of Colleen Jones, a Canadian curling great and a fixture in Canadian broadcasting for decades. A 6-time national champion and 2-time world champion, Colleen was a trailblazer whose excellence inspired generations, especially young women who saw in her what was possible. Beyond the rink, she brought warmth, humor, and unmistakable energy to television, connecting with viewers as naturally as she competed on the ice. On a personal note, I fondly recall the lighthearted banter she once shared with my father, Don Duguid, during major curling broadcasts, moments that captured the camaraderie and joy at the heart of our sport. Mr. Speaker, Canada has lost a champion, a storyteller, and a role model. I ask all members to join me in offering condolences to her family, her teammates, and the many Canadians she inspired. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
In Kitchener, families are making heartbreaking sacrifices just to get by. Alex, a father, told me he eats barely half a meal a day, so his children can have 3 meals a day. Kirby, who not only has to worry about his children but also his grandfather, shared with me that if he feeds them, he waits until they're finished, and if there's none left, he'll just have to wait until tomorrow. This is not okay. Yet this budget offers nothing to ease their burden. Instead, it piles on unprecedented debt that will drive inflation higher and push grocery prices further out of reach for Canadians. Canadians do not need empty promises. They need affordability, dignity, and hope. We cannot accept a budget that ignores the reality that Canadians and our children are going hungry. They deserve better.
The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier-Gloucester. Mr. Speaker, it is with great sadness that I pay tribute to Rolande Fauché, a trusted, strong and passionate woman who was not afraid to speak her mind. A tireless activist, sociologist and researcher, she dedicated her life to defending the interests of the Francophone community and promoting education and culture in Ontario. Rolande was not only a builder and community leader, she was an inspiring female role model and a remarkable presence for all those, including myself, who had the good fortune to know her. Her courage and bold vision paved the way for cultural and educational initiatives such as the implementation of French-language school management, La Nouvelle Scène, and the campaign to save Montfort Hospital. She was a friend, a confidant, and a partner in crime. An exceptional Franco-Ontarian, she leaves behind a lasting legacy that continues to shine a light on our community. Watch over us all, Rolande, especially your children, Luc and Chantal and Alain. and all your family and close ones.
The honourable member for Markham-Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, 2.2 million Canadians line up at food banks every single month, and the unemployment rate is 6.9%. Yet, as chair of Brookfield, the Prime Minister helped the company avoid $6.5 billion in Canadian taxes through offshore tax havens. While the Prime Minister dropped the most expensive budget in Canadian history outside COVID, the Liberal government has shown us their top priority, making Brookfield richer. Mr. Speaker, Canadians need transparency about the total incentive structure acting on our Prime Minister. Canadians need to know that this doubling of Trudeau's deficit is serving our total national interest, not simply those in the Prime Minister's circle. Mr. Speaker, Canadians need to know, is our Prime Minister incentivized to serve all Canadians?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the life and legacy of a true Nova Scotian legend. Throughout her decades-long careers in curling and journalism, Colleen Jones broke down barrier after barrier, smashing through glass ceilings. A two-time world champion, 6-time national champion, and 16-time provincial champion, having played more Scotties games than any curler in Canadian history, she was a staple in Canadian athletics. If that weren't enough, Colleen had a 40-year career at CBC, where she made history as the first female sports anchor in Halifax. In 2015, she said the following: "My feeling is, do the things that make us happy now, because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Appreciate life, don't sweat the small stuff, and enjoy the ride." I only met Colleen a couple of times, but I think she took her own advice, and I'm very hopeful that she enjoyed her ride. I'd ask all members of the House to join me in remembering this incredible woman and paying our respects to her family, friends, and loved ones. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales.
Let's get it going. There he is. All right.
In what year will construction begin on a new pipeline to the Pacific?
En anglais. That was he did it in English.
Mr. Speaker, the world is changing rapidly. The United States, the world's largest economy, is fundamentally reshaping all of its trade relationships, causing major disruption and upheaval for Canadians. It's time to transform our economy from one that is reliant on a single trading partner to one that is stronger, more self-sufficient, and resilient to global shocks. To these ends, Canada and Alberta share the same ambitions: diversify our export markets, make Canada an energy superpower, and build a stronger, cleaner, more independent, more competitive economy.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All right, he can't tell us the year in which construction will begin. Can he tell us in what decade will construction begin on a new pipeline to the Pacific?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, today is a really important day because we are taking important steps forward on cooperative federalism. The Prime Minister has been clear, and we've always known, we cannot reach our climate objectives if we are not working with all of the provinces and territories. Today, Alberta has committed to work with us on clean electricity regulations. They have committed in this agreement to work towards a stronger industrial carbon price. They have committed to work with us on methane regulations. Those are important steps forward for Canada to move towards its climate objectives, and we will keep doing that work.
Climate change is a scam.
So they don't know the year that construction will begin. They don't know the decade that construction will begin. And the Environment Minister couldn't even bring herself to utter the word pipeline in her answer to the question. And what today's deal allows a proposal for a pipeline to go to an office in 7 months, which will then be studied for 2 years, after which the Prime Minister will give a pipeline veto to the BC NDP Premier, who's already said he's against. Isn't this pipeline going to be built in the year never?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, this is a big, large, great, grand day for Canada. Our government has reached an important MOU with Danielle Smith, the Premier, and the province of Alberta that creates an energy transition in all aspects of energy. It sets the stage for an industrial transformation. It will make Canada stronger, more independent, more resilient, and more sustainable, and it will include the largest carbon capture project in the world. It will mean all of Alberta's energy resources are among the lowest energy intensive in the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No one tells us when a pipeline will be under construction. Let's just unpack the Prime Minister's allusion here. He's telling the Keep It in the Ground caucus of the Liberal Party that they just need to be quiet because there won't be a pipeline anyway. What he will do is delay it for several years until after a prospective election during which he can dangle a possible pipeline in front of the people, but after which he can hand veto power that is not in the Constitution over to the BC NDP Premier, who will block the thing from ever happening. Isn't it true that this isn't a pipeline? It's a pipe dream.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the country, indeed the world, is calling out for serious leadership, for cooperative leadership, for leadership that brings people together and parties together. I don't think this leader has any conception of what is required to do the kind of development that he is proposing. Of course we will consult and deal with the Premier, the duly elected Premier of British Columbia. Of course we will and have a duty to consult with First Nations. Of course we will do this in a cooperative way. We'll do it in the Canadian way, and we'll do it in the right way, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, they will stand in the way is what they will do. We know that the only thing stopping a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific is the Prime Minister. Let's unpack the legality of it. The Constitution, Section 9210A, gives the federal government exclusive approval power for a pipeline. Bill C-5, a bill the Prime Minister pushed through the House of Commons, and we even supported him, gives him the power to approve it. So we only need him to do one thing for this pipeline to happen. Get out of the way. Will he do it?
Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, when Canadians elected our government, they were clear. They wanted to see us build a strong Canada, and they wanted to see us build it well and build it together. They wanted to see that we could work together as a country, and that means that we do things like this agreement with Alberta that helps us move forward on industrial carbon pricing, moves forward on methane regulation, moves forward on clean electricity, but also respects other jurisdictions like the province of British Columbia, with which we must seek agreement.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, she accidentally told the truth, Mr. Speaker. She didn't say that it moves forward on a pipeline. She said it moves forward on an industrial carbon tax. A carbon tax that will increase the cost of everything it takes to build a home, so it's a tax on homes. On everything it takes to grow food, so it's a tax on food. It's a tax that drives production out, paychecks down, and the cost of living up. Meanwhile, it does not move forward with a pipeline. We as Conservatives believe in clearing the way to get pipelines built. In other words, we would build a pipeline without a carbon tax. They would build a carbon tax without a pipeline.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I suspect Canadians are straining to find the Leader of the Opposition credible on any of this. What this Memorandum of Understanding does is create a carbon capture and storage system that will lead the world. It will include, of course, bringing together of partners with whom we have a duty to consult and with other jurisdictions. It will create electric jobs in the electrical system. It will create construction jobs. It will create opportunity across Western Canada, Mr. Speaker, but most importantly will make Canada an energy superpower. Why can't the Leader of the Opposition see that?
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, on November 27th, today, this government will have completely betrayed climate goals and people who have suffered from climate events. To help the leaders of oil companies, who are often American, the Prime Minister has signed an agreement that will force him to ignore the leader of BC, ignore First Nations. So, with this happening to BC, will Quebec be next? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we should not be surprised that the leader of the Bloc Québécois looks for any excuse to sow division within Canada. What we're seeing today is the same thing as we do with Quebec, which is cooperate, work together so that federalism can create economic opportunity. Yes, a renewable energy, a climate of opportunity for young people. How can the leader of the Bloc Québécois object to that? The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Let's not even pretend to claim that it could be because they haven't read their own documents. Because if you read it, it's pretty clear. They claim that they want a single Canadian economy, which is not the economy of BC or Quebec, but which instead belongs to Ottawa and Calgary, ignoring legislation, ignoring environmental assessment, ignoring First Nations, ignoring provincial jurisdiction. Ignoring all that, the Prime Minister is going to impose a business plan that only serves oil companies and himself. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been very clear here in this House. He stated that we also need an agreement with BC and with First Nations. But in addition, this agreement includes significant commitments to the province of Alberta regarding the industrial carbon pricing system for methane regulations for clean energy, and we will continue to work closely with all provinces in order to fight climate change. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. It sounds like I just heard the Minister of the Environment say that she agrees with this odious agreement, which has abandoned the oil and gas emissions cap and even electricity production within what she just said. Yesterday, I asked whether this government would formally and solemnly promise to never force BC to accept a pipeline or force First Nations to accept it. The government house leader, who often says the opposite of the truth, rose and said yes, he should have simply remained seated. The Honourable Government House Leader. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, I am getting up. I am standing up. I am standing like all of my colleagues on this side of the House because we have work to do. We have the work of building a nation, working together with provinces, consulting First Nations, and building a climate framework which will enable us to reach net zero by 2050. And we will do that by working with all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. That is what we are going to do. That's what voters asked us to do. And no matter what the Bloc Québécois says, we are here to build Canada strong. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, in Canada's in the Canadian government conflict of interest legislation, when it comes to the regulations that public office holders must respect, it is clearly indicated that to favor a person or organization through a person who has been retained to represent them is not allowed. The federal Liberal member for Laval-les-Îles is currently being investigated by Quebec's chief electoral officer because he participated in Ottawa flim-flammery. Can the Prime Minister confirm that none of his ministers or members are part of that flim-flammery? Next question. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I once again am coming back to federal conflict of interest legislation. We know that the federal MP for Laval-les-Îles is currently being investigated by the Quebec Chief Electoral Officer That is a fact. So my question is simple. Can the Prime Minister confirm that no member of his cabinet or caucus are part of that scandal? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, that is not a question that has to do with the administration of this government. But I can confirm that all of the members and ministers on this side of the House carefully follow the ethics code, which is one of the strictest in the world.
For Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, people in Windsor are tired of hearing promises. They just want to know why this Prime Minister stopped fighting for them. He said he would go elbows up at the U.S., but when he failed, he shrugged and said, who cares? Workers in Windsor care. Our auto sector and suppliers care. Conservatives care. Meanwhile, the U.S. signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with Brookfield, the Prime Minister's own company. Why is it that every time the Prime Minister travels, business only gets better for Brookfield, while Canadians are left out in the cold?
Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I find that member's suggestion that the Conservatives care interesting, because the Conservatives voted against 18,000 construction jobs at Darlington Nuclear Project, 9,700 jobs at the Northwest Transmission Line in BC, over 10,000 jobs at the LNG2 facility, 5,000 jobs at the graphite mine in Quebec. These investments represent real progress for workers. So here's something that we should know. Conservatives vote against jobs and Canadians. Our new government stands up for workers and jobs.
Good job. The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, last week we found out this government sent 500 million tax dollar payers to the European Space Agency. And guess who owns half the UK campus that money is going to? You guessed it right, Mr. Speaker, Brookfield. All the same time, Windsor workers are being shut out of plants, contracts are stalling, and families are worried about their future. Why is the Prime Minister sending money overseas, helping a company he's tied to, instead of fighting to protect jobs in Windsor, which has the highest unemployment rate in the country, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
That member voted against the largest infrastructure investment in Canadian history, Mr. Speaker. Jobs for the IBEW, jobs for the carpenters, jobs for the airmen, jobs for the union members in his riding, Mr. Speaker. We will be building big, building with steel, building with Canadian steel, Canadian lumber, Mr. Speaker. When will the Conservatives get on board with Canadian workers, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, there is yet another scandal, Mr. Speaker. In the federal budget, this Liberal government is prioritizing money for modular housing. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing nuclear energy. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing funds for rail transport. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing data storage. And guess what? Brookfield, too. So, Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister sacrificing our national interests for his own personal profit? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Mr. Speaker, every time my colleague rises in the House, I recognize that he has remarkable histrionic qualities, but nonetheless, what he said doesn't make a lot of sense. When his leader was housing minister, he only managed to get 6 units of affordable housing built. On this side of the House, we will be working hard to build affordable housing, to increase housing supply, reducing pressures for first-time buyers. That's good news for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. I'll give some more examples, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is prioritizing AI, so is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing clean energy, so is Brookfield. Last week, we learned that the Liberals put $500 million taxpayer money, gave that money to the European Space Agency. And who owns 50% of the campus? Brookfield, of course. Why is the Prime Minister sending our jobs abroad, our money into space? Why is he placing his own financial interests before those of all Canadians?
Honorable ministre.
Monsieur le Président, je me demande aux intérêts de qui il pensait quand il a voté contre le budget qui prévoit une baisse d'impôts pour 22 millions de Canadiens, Monsieur le Président, le régime canadien de soins dentaires, l'allocation canadienne pour enfants, des emplois au port de Québec, au port de Saguenay, le développement économique, des emplois dans sa région au chantier des vies, Monsieur le Président. À qui il pensait certainement pas à son monde. Merci.
Si j'ai bien compris,
Interpretation, the microphone was off. Interpretation will now resume.
Medicine Hat Cardston.
Speaker, the Prime Minister's Brookfield conflicts of interest continue to grow. But keeping his shares, options, and performance pay worth millions of dollars, every major decision the PM says he makes for Canada, like nuclear deals, AI, EU space agencies, and many more, all have the potential to make himself wealthier. While Canadians suffer, business for Brookfield has never been better. When will the Prime Minister admit his conflicts, divest his shares, and prioritize Canadians' best interest rather than his own portfolio investments?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Today, the announcement with the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta is good news for workers all across this country. It's good news for workers in Alberta. It's certainly good news for skilled tradespeople and the young apprentices coming up, learning these trades. Mr. Speaker, this is an announcement about prosperity. It's shared prosperity, Mr. Speaker. It scopes in Indigenous people and creates wealth. I certainly hope that member understands this is something that will deeply benefit not just his province, but the entire country.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister's green facade is crumbling now that he's announced another dirty oil pipeline. And beneath that green facade, we're just seeing the black of oil, just as much as with the Conservatives, and perhaps even darker, because over 10 years in power, Stephen Harper did not manage to bring in a pipeline. Whereas the Liberals announced a second one this morning, with perhaps more to come. They seem to have given up completely on meeting their climate emissions targets. When it comes to the environment, are they worse than the Conservatives, or is it all just the same thing? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I've said it before and I'll say it again. We can only meet our climate targets by working closely with the provinces and territories. Canadians elected us because they wanted to see us working with the provinces and territories. And that's what we're doing with this agreement. Alberta has committed to working with us on an industrial carbon price, on methane emissions, and on clean electricity. That is what we have to do that is what we have to do to fight climate change, and that's what we will do. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to believe that the Minister of the Environment is defending pipelines. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Let's look at what our so-called Green Prime Minister is doing. He put an end to carbon pricing. He has given up on zero-emission vehicle targets. He has put an end to the emissions cap for the oil and gas sector, billions of dollars in tax credits for fossil fuel, boycotted COP30, given up on environmental assessments for oil projects under C5. And today we have yet another pipeline which will undermine the oil tankers moratorium in a marine protected area. Is this the Liberal government, or is this Donald Trump's policy? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians elected us to build Canada strong, and that is what we're going to do. Let's look at the projects we've brought forward. We've brought in a hydroelectric project in Iqaluit. We brought in a clean electricity project in the northern part of BC. We are going to continue doing the work. Today is yet another time when we are continuing to maintain an industrial carbon price. We are continuing to have methane regulations, clean electricity regulations, not just regulations, but what we are going to build. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Vaska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said, who cares, when asked what was happening to the negotiations with the U.S. And he backed down on the digital services tax without getting anything in return, at least not for Canadians, because a few days later, the Americans suddenly signed an $80 billion with whom? With Brookfield. the Prime Minister's company. Why is he sacrificing the interests of Canadians and promoting his own? I know what they're going to say. They're going to talk about the budget, pipelines, housing. It's all very well, but they're never going to actually answer my question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, I have good news for all workers in Canada. The big projects that we're bringing in will generate great jobs throughout the country. Good unionized jobs in all areas. And that will help all of Canada move forward. Thank you.
Member for York Centre.
Who cares? Who cares, said the Prime Minister when asked about contact with the U.S. President on a trade deal. Everyday Canadians care. Everyday Canadians who are going broke or who are losing their jobs because of this trade uncertainty. In my city of Toronto, investment, commerce, and real estate froze. Only 25 new condos were sold last month in a city of 3 million. Other than Brookfield, nobody can make a decision because of the uncertainty caused by this Prime Minister's failure to get a trade deal. So instead of being dismissive and derisive, why doesn't the Prime Minister keep his word and finally get a trade deal?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Yesterday, I stood with the Prime Minister and the President of DeFasco as we announced additional supports for steel, for lumber, Mr. Speaker, for the communities and their organizations and their employees that have been deeply impacted by tariffs. And, Mr. Speaker, they're not only encouraged by our support, but they're excited about the future. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because they have an opportunity through Buy Canada policies to pivot their products and sell to Canadian projects. And, Mr. Speaker, that's what Canadians expect, that we invest in ourselves, that we take care of ourselves, something these guys can't get.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Hill South.
This Prime Minister went from promising elbows up to throwing his hands up, saying who cares the moment the President pushed back. He caved on the digital services tax, abandoned counter tariffs, and walked away from the softwood legal fight, leaving Canadian workers totally defenseless. We thought he got nothing in return, but it turns out he got nothing for Canadians, because just days later, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with his former company, none other, Brookfield. So while Canadian workers are left standing in the penalty box, the Prime Minister's friends are skating away with the puck. Why is this Liberal Prime Minister trading away Canada's national interests while advancing his own personal interests?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, again, that member voted against the budget, which is going to see the largest investment in infrastructure across this great country, Mr. Speaker. We're going to be building homes, building community centres, hospitals, bridges, roads, Mr. Speaker, all with Canadian steel, Canadian lumber, Canadian unionized worker. Mr. Speaker, every day the Conservatives come in here and they vote against jobs and they vote against Canadians.
Member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, that member did not answer the question, so I'm going to ask it again. The Prime Minister caved on counter tariffs, on digital services taxes, on legal disputes with the softwood lumber. We thought he was getting nothing for Canadians, but it turns out he was getting lots for his company, Brookfield. Days after he was in the White House, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear reactor deal with Brookfield. Why is it that everywhere the Prime Minister goes, Brookfield gets a sweet deal and Canadians get no deal? Why?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, speaking about trade, Canadians know that 2/3 of our economy is powered by trade. We're opening doors for Canadian products to reach new global markets. We signed new trade deals with Ecuador, Indonesia, an investment agreement with UAE, securing $70 billion commitment for more investments in Canada. This is what this government is focused on, is opening new doors and more opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Niagara West.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians why every time we ask about a conflict of interest with Brookfield, his answer is basically, who cares? Nothing to see here. Just ignore the fact that I used to run the place. Because Canadians are starting to wonder, if Brookfield were any closer to this government, would it need a visitor's pass or just a set of cabinet keys? So my question is simple. How can Canadians trust decisions aren't being made in the boardroom instead of the House of Commons? Or is this Liberal government now offering loyalty points for conflict of interest?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians made a decision on April 28th between two visions for this country. A vision of hope, a vision of leadership, versus slogans and division. Our Prime Minister is a world economic and business leader. He has traveled the world building up relationships and signing deals to build our economy, something that leaders never worked a day in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Peterborough.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we know meaningful consultation with Indigenous right holders is essential to protecting rights, supporting sustainable development, and building respectful long-term relationships. Could the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations share how early and ongoing engagement with Indigenous communities is helping improve our federal approach to consultation?
The Honourable Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All major projects will only proceed after meaningful consultation with Indigenous rights holders. We cannot and will not move forward at the expense of Indigenous rights. Budget 2025 invests $10.1 million in the federal initiative on consultation. This includes funding for consultation protocols, which set out clear, mutually agreed processes for how communities want to be engaged, making consultations more efficient and respectful. We have also invested in Indigenous-led resource centres, which provide the research, technical advice, and expertise communities need.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals killed the Northern Gateway pipeline project, making Canada more dependent on the U.S. Now this Prime Minister is putting on a big show, but he's setting up another process for a pipeline to fail with new hurdles and hoops, and worst of all, a massive increase to the industrial carbon tax. The proposed pipeline is never going to happen because this Prime Minister is giving a veto to the BC Premier. But what is guaranteed to happen after April 1st is Albertans will pay a very real and very massive hike to the industrial carbon tax. Why is this Prime Minister more intent on hiking carbon taxes instead of building pipelines?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
It's perplexing to us over here why they keep talking about some supposed veto by the BC Premier when, in fact, of course, we will deal with the people and the province of British Columbia. But what they don't mention is the signature of the Premier of Alberta on a memorandum of understanding that commits us to consulting provinces, consulting First Nations, building out clean and renewable technologies, an electric grid, and building and creating opportunity for young Western Canadians for generations to come.
For Regina Capel.
It doesn't matter how many signatures they put on that MOU if they give a giant veto stamp to the British Columbia Premier, Mr. Speaker. Instead of just repealing all the Liberal leave-it-in-the-ground laws that killed energy projects, this Prime Minister has just unveiled a new process that is designed to fail. He's giving an unconstitutional veto to the BC Premier. He's forcing Albertans to pay billions to put air into the ground, and now he's hiking the industrial carbon tax. Every time the Liberals hike those carbon taxes, everything gets more expensive. Why is this government forcing through a massive hike to the carbon tax instead of just getting out of the way?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As Canadians watch this debate unfold, Mr. Speaker, they will take note of lines like putting air into the ground. In fact, we are putting carbon into the ground. We are taking it out of the atmosphere, making our production of energy resources less carbon intensive and putting carbon, in fact, underground, therefore committing Canada in the fight against climate change. Mr. Speaker, it's very interesting, and I know Canadians will be following this debate with great interest, and the slogans of the Conservatives will be something that they won't forget.
Honourable Member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
Mr. Speaker, the current Prime Minister was the advisor to the last Prime Minister, and under his watch, no private company was able to build a pipeline. Not TC Energy, not Enbridge, not Kinder Morgan, just the Canadian taxpayer. Now we learn that Alberta must initiate a carbon capture project via the Pathways Alliance in exchange for a pipeline. And who has a significant stake in Entropy, one of the leading Pathways carbon capture companies? Well, it's none other than the Prime Minister's company, Brookfield.
Oh, wow.
Which begs the question, is the only way anything can be built in Canada is if Brookfield profits?
Of course it is. He's a con man. He's a scammer. snake oil salesman.
Mr. Speaker, the owners of the Pathways project for carbon capture and storage are in fact 6 oil and gas companies, all of whom operate in the province of Alberta and employ thousands of...
The honourable member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
We know that the Prime Minister has been meeting with Brookfield executives behind closed doors. This is the same Prime Minister who served as board chair of Brookfield Asset Management. And now we learn that he won't allow Alberta to build a pipeline unless it initiates a $16.5 billion carbon capture project where Brookfield profits. The taxes and royalties from a pipeline should be used for doctors, nurses, roads, schools, police, housing, and securing our country. But instead, billions will now pour into the coffers of corporate giants and liberal insiders, including, of course, Brookfield. How much revenue does the Prime Minister have to divert to his own company before he demands that Canada just simply change its name to Brookfield?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I think the members across, and maybe in particular those members from the province of Alberta, really underestimate how strongly their constituents feel about having a plan to reduce our carbon emissions, reduce the intensity of our energy production, to, yes, lead the world in carbon capture and storage, to build an energy grid throughout Western Canada that makes sure renewable energy gets across Western Canada, and most importantly, they underestimate the hopes of the parents of young Albertans who want to see a future for them in that province, and that's what this thing does today.
The honourable member for Cloverdale-Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own cabinet and caucus are fighting over this pipeline announcement. Ministers are worried, BC Liberal caucus members are seething and angry, and leaks are coming out by the hour. Meanwhile, Canadians know the real issue. Without a pipeline to the Pacific, the United States is basically our only market for Canadian oil. We cannot reach global buyers until we have coastal access. When will the Prime Minister stop managing caucus drama and start using his authority that he already has to guarantee a pipeline built to the coast?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, today is an important day because this MOU means jobs in clean energy, jobs building data centers, jobs building the largest carbon capture project in Canada. Mr. Speaker, jobs for young people, good union jobs for the building trades, for the IBW, for the iron workers, for LIUNA, for the UA, for the millwrights, for the workers who build this country every day.
The honourable member for Cloverdale-Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, approving a nation-building project like a pipeline to the coast is the Prime Minister's responsibility. It sits squarely in the federal government's hands. But instead of owning that responsibility, the Prime Minister is letting the NDP Premier in BC have a veto. And he's doing it to calm the anger in his own caucus, not to move the country forward. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind the NDP Premier and make the call that only his government has the jurisdiction to make?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, that member is a British Columbia MP. Is she seriously suggesting that the people and the government of British Columbia should have no say about a piece of infrastructure that will go across the entire breadth of that province? It's very interesting to me that that member who represents British Columbians would want to subtract the voice of her own provincial government from that debate. For that matter, subtract the voice of First Nations. This is a historic agreement. It sets out a path forward, Mr. Speaker, but we're going to do it the Canadian way, cooperatively.
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister facing open rebellion? A Liberal MP told CBC News that their caucus is seething and angry over a pipeline. No wonder the Prime Minister keeps flip-flopping. One day he's for a pipeline, the next day he claims it's up to BC NDP for David Eby. The Constitution is absolutely clear that the sole authority over pipelines is the Prime Minister. Is he breaking his promise to no pipeline David Eby, or will he break his promise to build it through delays, over-regulation, and endless consultations?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, once again, British Columbia member of parliament standing up, wishing to subtract the voice of his own provincial government, the duly elected government of the people of British Columbia, who wish to have a say over a development of infrastructure that would span the entire breadth of that province. I think when that member thinks a little more seriously about this issue, he will agree that cooperative federalism and working with provinces, including Alberta and British Columbia, on things like this historic announcement today are the right way to go.
The honourable member for Peace River Westlock.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are looking for collaboration, no doubt, but the Prime Minister went around to wave just another piece of paper that promises a potential pipeline, maybe sometime in the future, but in reality it guarantees nothing. I can tell you that the only thing that was guaranteed today was that Albertans and Canadians will be continued to pay more with an industrial carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are looking for a guarantee. So the simple question is, can the Prime Minister guarantee what year will shovels be in the ground on this proposed pipeline?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, 2 British Columbian MPs who want to subtract the voice of their provincial government. Now an Albertan MP who questions the wisdom of the Conservative Premier of Alberta, whose signature is still wet on a memorandum of understanding that comprehensively sets out an economic path forward for her province, for the young people who wish to create an economic future for themselves in that province. Mr. Speaker, I'm amazed that these Conservative MPs from British Columbia and Alberta want to deny their own provincial governments the ability to create an economic future in Western Canada.
The honourable member for Airdrie Cochrane.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is still no construction date for a pipeline, and the Prime Minister blames everyone else. The BC government, the First Nations, anyone but himself. Of course, it's really the leave it in the ground members of his own caucus that are trying to stop it. Where is Guibo anyway? But the Prime Minister could approve an oil pipeline to the Pacific without a carbon tax, without delays, without any excuses.
Very true.
The proof's in the pudding, and it's not a pipeline until it's built. So will the Prime Minister tell Canadians today, when will shovels be in the ground on this oil pipeline? Just give us a year.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, it's been interesting to see the Conservatives have a newfound interest in Canada's Constitution. They point out on occasion the federal government has certain authorities in this respect, but they have not taken care to actually read the entirety of the provision they so routinely cite, which similarly empowers provincial governments to actually build the infrastructure necessary to operate a pipeline in this country. They similarly ignore Section 35 of the Constitution, which guarantees the inherent and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples in this country and requires the government to consult with rights holders who may be impacted. We can build this country if we work together. It's a shame the Conservatives, after many opportunities to govern, have failed to learn that lesson.
The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong...
The honourable member, I'll let the honourable member start over, but without gesticulation. The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear that our government is focused on building Canada strong, Canadian steel to build Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister of Jobs and Families...
With me, the honourable member from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear our government is focused on building Canada strong. Canadian steel to build Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister...
Obviously, some members want to hear this over and over again. So from the top.
Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defense requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear that our government is focused on building Canada strong. Canadian steel from Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister of Jobs and Families please tell this House how our government is supporting steelworkers as we transition to buy Canadian industrial self-reliance?
Okay. Now we have to hear the answer. So the Honourable Minister of...
Finally, Mr. Speaker, Hamilton gets a voice in the
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Hamilton gets a voice in the House of Commons with this strong MP who had to repeat his question for words. To the workers of Hamilton who are really struggling and working so hard to pivot to new product and to new markets. And that's why standing beside DeFasco yesterday, Mr. Speaker, one of the backbones of our steel industry here in Canada, and the Prime Minister, as we continue to support that industry to pivot to new markets and to new product, was so important. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we'll listen to the steel industry.
The Honourable Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes.
The Cowichan Court ruling in the British Columbia Supreme Court is causing real damage in Richmond. Banks are pulling back, buyers are walking away, investment is on hold, and families and businesses are being left in limbo. On October 23rd, Richmond Council urgently asked the Attorney General to protect private property rights. This Liberal government didn't even bother to respond. And a few days ago, the Richmond Council passed another motion demanding immediate federal action to mitigate the harm to affected residents. Why is the government abandoning the people whose homes and livelihoods are now at risk?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous
Thank you, Mr.
Relations.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada disagrees with the BC Supreme Court's ruling and appealed it on September 8th. We're reviewing potential legal arguments, and all options are on the table. Further legal clarity is required to address the decision, particularly relating to private property rights. We will continue to work collaboratively with all parties to uphold the principles of reconciliation, transparency, and legal responsibility. We remain available for dialogue with the other parties to litigation throughout this process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Richmond Centre, Marpole.
Mr. Speaker, families, farmers and businesses, people who bought and owned property in my community of Richmond are now fearful their titles may no longer be secure because of the convention ruling. Property ownership is one of the core institutions upon which this country is built. This Liberal government's failure to properly fight for and communicate with folks in BC has created an environment of fear and dread that they may soon lose their rights over their own property. What will the Minister do to ensure that countless BC residents will not lose their rights as property owners?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government disagrees with the BC Supreme Court's decision and appealed the decision alongside the Government of British Columbia, the City of Richmond, Musqueam, Tsawwassen, as well as the Cowichan. We absolutely understand the concerns of residents, which is why we've taken this step. We're reviewing potential legal arguments, and all options are on the table. As this case is before the courts, I will not comment any further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
This appeal will drag out for years. The Cowichan Tribes versus Canada court decision continues to put private property rights at risk. Uncertainty is now escalating into anger and unrest. Landowners are unable to get mortgages, businesses are building facilities in the U.S. instead of BC, and neighbours are turning on each other with verbal threats. Will the Prime Minister finally show some leadership and confirm this appeal will always protect private land title and acknowledge that this is an existential threat to the institution of private property ownership across Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. as I've mentioned multiple times in question period today, as well as past question periods, our government disagrees with the BC Supreme Court decision, and we are appealing it. We are reviewing all options, and as this case is before the courts, I will not comment any further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Across the country, Canadians are seeing a rise in hate, threats, and intimidation aimed at our communities. If the Conservatives are finally ready to put safety of their own communities first, the Combating Hate Act is right in front of them. Right. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Justice tell us what this legislation will mean for the safety of our neighbourhoods, schools, and places of worship?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want this Parliament to take action to combat a rising trend of hate crimes in this country. For our part, we have introduced Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, which seeks to protect Canadians by putting in place criminal penalties for those who would commit hate crimes against people, whether on the doorsteps of our religious institutions or in our committees more broadly. This is an important day in the future of this legislation. The Justice Committee will be looking at the specific clauses of this bill after question period today, and Canadians will come to understand which parties are interested in protecting communities against hate and which are more interested in obstructing and delaying this legislation. When Canadians are watching, I hope we can demonstrate a spirit of...
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
A senior Liberal debating my bill to stop leniency for non-citizens convicted of serious crimes said this: if someone is going out there and raping another individual, do we really believe that they are going to get special treatment from a judge? Well, the very next day, there was a report of a non-citizen in Barrie being convicted of raping a 13-year-old little girl and impregnating her twice. And the rapist had been given an adjournment to see what impact his guilty plea would have on what? His immigration status. Oh. Will the Liberals admit that they were wrong?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, there are provisions in place if a non-citizen commits a crime and serves a sentence. Right. They are removed from Canada. Mr. Speaker, CBSA works on these cases, and they prioritize criminal cases, in fact, when making removals. Thank you.
Honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is trying to revive a failed bitumen pipeline from Alberta through BC that went nowhere under Stephen Harper's Conservatives and still has no First Nations consent. Talks about ending the oil tanker ban to enable this scheme in an MOU without BC at the table and without coastal First Nations involvement is harming a critical relationship and getting things done. Does this Prime Minister actually realize that pushing a project the coast has already fully rejected is breaking trust with coastal First Nations?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said it in this House, and I will repeat it because I think it's very important to hear it again. We need to ensure the agreement of British Columbia and of First Nations. That is an important part of how we work forward on building a strong Canada, and I hope that if by repeating it, everyone can make sure that those words are heard.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
At no time during the campaign did the Prime Minister say the tanker ban will be lifted or changed. BC Coastal First Nations is saying loud and clear that the tanker ban is not up for negotiation, and no MOU will change that. This secret deal signed behind closed doors without BC and First Nations at the table is a betrayal. Enbridge 2.0 will not proceed without First Nations free, prior, informed consent, and BC will not stand for it. Will the Prime Minister acknowledge that this is the pipeline for nowhere but the courts, and stop wasting everyone's time with this political posturing?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I believe this is the last question, you can see the span of views in this chamber. It's interesting to me that it is a Liberal government and the Liberal Party that finds the cooperative, consensual way forward. Of course, in response to the member, we will work with and have a duty to consult First Nations. Of course, we will work with and have a duty to work with the province of British Columbia, as we do indeed with the province of Alberta. This is a visionary agreement today, a memorandum of understanding that sets a course for the future of West.
And that's it for today, for question period. Je désire...
Oh,
I wish to
well.
inform the House.
What a shit show that was, huh? My goodness. Well, not bad for a Thursday. How many times was he going to let Danko say the same stupid question that he's proposing to Sean Fraser? It's an embarrassment. I'm not going to lie. House Commons, all the foolishness, and it's run so poorly. Anyhow, what are you going to do? Thank you all so much for watching. Aaron Canadian Looney. We've got a couple of videos that will be dropping this evening. That is it. Thank you all so much for hanging out in the chat room. Hopefully, everyone enjoys it as much as I do. You guys crack me up here every single day. And that makes it a lot easier to tolerate, to watch, indeed. Anyhow, gang, we're going to go out on the way we do it. You guys know how we do it.
You should do exercise.
Thank you all so much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.
And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper, bumper, stomper, boo. Tell me, tell me, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Bing bong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, kimble, loopy loo. Bobbity stompity, romper room. Romper room and friends.
It's Friday tomorrow, so just a reminder to people, the show's a few hours earlier, 3 hours early on Fridays. That's it. They start question period early. We're going to start early too. Hopefully we'll see everybody there tomorrow. If not, have a great weekend. Check out one of the other videos floating around. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Smash the like, hit subscribe. Thank you, Kirk and Rhonda. Appreciate all your help. All the new viewers. Come back. We're here tomorrow, and we're here all week next week. Come and learn something about Canadian federal politics. Don't trust the news. Watch the Frontline Politics. We're out. Thanks for